don't congratulate yourself too much, but don't berate yourself too much either. And it's about finding that delicate balance of knowing, am I doing fantastic? Maybe not, but am I doing terribly? Probably not either. Most people's choices are half chance, right? You will either pick the right door or the wrong door.
Welcome everybody to Born Unstoppable. My name is Thiago Luzvargi, and I believe you were uniquely designed to be an unstoppable force for good. Each episode, we will be bringing you incredible guests that have overcome challenges in their life so that you can learn from their experience and implement their strategies to grow in the areas that matter the most: your health, wealth, and relationships. Michael, it's so good to have you here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good considering it's a pandemic.
That's awesome. For those of you that are new to the podcast and don't know anything about Michael is a co-founder of Pure Colo Inc. He's a chief operating officer at the Ottawa Product Management Associations, and he is the region organizer for LinkedIn Local in Ottawa. And he won an award called the Bootstrap and Best New Auto Business Awards winner in 2018 and 2019. Mm-hmm. Michael, I'd like to start off with some rapid fire questions just to get you warmed up, get people to know you, kind of like the basics of who you are. If something important comes up, then we can circle back around and talk about it. Are you down?
Sounds pretty dangerous, but I guess I'll give it a go.
All right. Where did you grow up?
Perth, actually, small town about an hour away from here.
I've heard of it. I know a friend who's an emergency doctor there.
Oh, there's not many of them, unfortunately.
Yeah. Where do you live now?
I live in Ottawa now.
Okay. What's your favorite quote?
Oh God, that's okay. You know what? I do have a good one. Okay. I can't tell you who it's by because this is rapid fire, so I'm struggling with that. But the quote goes something like, "It's not about what you know, it's about what you know that just ain't so." And I can't articulate who it was that said that off the top of my head, but I think very critical for anyone doing literally anything. If you think you have the right answer and you don't have the right answer, but you deploy the right answer and you think it be the right answer, you're in for a whole world of hurt. So that would have to be like one of my favorites.
Sounds like a good quote and a little complex.
Yeah. Considering we're doing podcasting, we have that cool thing called the Google, where you can actually, unless we had producers like those really fancy people, that tell you, what's going on and all that sort of stuff. But just ain't. I'm sure I'm going to be able to find. Yes, it's from the movie. Well, sorry, it's from a person. But initially it's from the movie The Big Short was where I heard it. Have you seen The Big Short? Yeah, great movie.
No, I have not.
Fantastic movie. Oh, you haven't? Sorry. It's fantastic. You really got to check it out. If you have any interest at all at understanding, and to all the listeners out there, if you have any interest in all in understanding what happened during the 2008 financial crisis, it's a great way to both enjoy a film because it's hilarious, but also understand the complexities of what happened. It's got an all-star cast. We're talking Christian Bale, Ryan Gosling, the guy from The Office. I can't even name it. But the original quote is actually a Mark Twain quote, funny enough. Yeah.
He's got a lot of quotes.
He's a pretty famous guy. Some people know him. So that'd be my favorite quote for sure.
Okay, it's a good quote.
Yeah.
What do you feel is holding people back from finding success right now?
It's another pretty complicated question, but I mean, myself personally was, if I think back to my early days, I don't know how this will resonate with some people, but because I would say I'm still kind of young, but but some more senior people might think, oh, what is this guy talking about back when he was young? But when I was younger, I actually worked for Coca-Cola right out of university, and I had that fire and that drive that all of us young guns, and I'm sure yourself a little bit with this awesome new podcast you're setting off here, have a bit of that fire in their belly, but they think that they can truly be the best of the best, the next Elon Musk kind of mentality. But a lot of the times they have it for the wrong reasons, and it actually dovetails quite nicely into the thing that I didn't have mentioned by you, but that something that I was involved in was the Tedx, right? So I did a speech, a 5-minute thing for Tedx in Canada, and my whole topic was around passion and motivation, and how a lot of people have great passion, but sometimes the motivations behind that passion are false. So if you think about through history, you've got people, great figures that are like Mother Teresa, who's motivated by empathy and caring, that does really great things because she's super passionate. Or you think about Albert Einstein and his famous quote. Here's another great quote. Albert Einstein's famous quote is, "I am not any sort of special person. I am just passionately curious," right?
Right.
So if you think about that from that angle, and then you go on the opposite end of the spectrum and you think about Hitler, right? Here's a guy that was extremely passionate, and he believed in his heart that that was the solution to problems, right? Terrible guy and terrible atrocities, and not downplaying that at all. But he was fueled by passion, and that's why the people believed him and bought into his war and all that sort of stuff from Germany, is because he had that fire in his belly. So I think the biggest thing holding people back to bring it all together is really that these people have passion, and sometimes it's misdirected. And in my case, I thought that money was everything. I thought that taking over the world and being the next big thing or whatever was the most important thing. And it always got me in trouble. It always had me at a disadvantage to my bosses, who would think I was coming for their job, or to other people in industry that thought, I was only caring about myself. And if we're being frank, I probably had a good amount of that in terms of I was poorly motivated in that way. As I started to think about more of how I can help other people and how I can get more involved with helping the community around me, the more I did that, weirdly enough, the more success came. The more passionate I became about that, it started to really take off in that way. Because then it's people aren't thinking you're out for yourself, you're out for them, and they inherently want to support you, right? They inherently want to help you. So I think that's probably something that really holds people back. And I don't know if that's something along your feelings as well. Given that you're from medical school and you have a helping background, I'd be curious to know, is that something that you kind of feel or agree with?
Sure. Yeah, I do agree with that. I think that's something we can come back to.
We'll come back to.
Well, yeah, we'll circle around. That's very important. And it's actually something that I have on, for later on that we can talk about.
Awesome.
Yeah. So the last question, what is one of your superpowers?
People. Connecting people. See what I did there? I connected the words together.
Yeah.
I think that's probably my superpower. I always had I'll give you another little quick story, but I had a boss when I was working for a company probably 5 or 6 years ago, and she would say to me, "Oh, Mike, he's going to know somebody at this company that we're going to mention," because he always knows somebody from some company, be it like a frontline worker or like a high level VP or CEO or whatever. And it actually used to always get thrown in my face as like a negative thing, like, "Oh, Mike's going to talk about how he knows somebody." And frankly, that was the truth. I would say those things because I wanted to pump myself up. But as I began to think about it more and more, I was like, no, this is actually like a really good skill. Not a lot of people can remember in their Rolodex of their brain all these names and what they do and stuff like that. And that was always a bit of a talent of mine to do that and to have that ability. So I'd say that's definitely a superpower. What about you? I want to hear yours.
My superpower. I haven't really narrowed it down to one thing, but I would say right now on the top of my head, my superpower could be just doing a whole experimenting. I think if I were to talk to those closest around me, they would say Thiago is always learning. Like no matter what I'm doing, even on my downtime, like when I'm not studying, I'm like listening to a podcast or I'm reading or I'm watching a educational YouTube video. So right now I'm in this phase of my life, I guess, of just accumulating knowledge so then I can practice it. So that would be one. It's not the greatest superpower at the moment, but it's kind of just on the top of my mind what shows up. It's something that I do on a daily basis.
Well, it's something that builds on itself and builds on itself. So that in itself, you're building a bit of a train that's got momentum of knowledge. So I think that's pretty cool.
So it's an investment I'm making for the future.
Yes. Better than some investments right now.
Yeah. Okay, so that's done. So the rapid fire questions are done. So let's kind of focus on some bigger questions. And so, when we met many months ago, we sat down and we talked, and I got to know a little bit about your story. And your upbringing was very interesting. I think it still is. And can you tell us how you got to where you are today? Just kind of like if you're to just tell us about little Michael from back then until now. Could you tell us the journey?
Yeah, so I'm going to warn your listeners to grab a box of tissues possibly because it's kind of a sad story. But I think it's an important one. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that have similar stories that are very much so more champion than myself in terms of where I come from. A great guy that people should look up is a guy named Michael Crossland from Australia. He had cancer since the age of 1, and he's pushed through all of that. He's a motivational speaker now. He goes out. He's had health problems his whole life. He, as somebody who had all these health problems growing up, ended up fulfilling his dream of playing AAA baseball.
Wow.
Even though he went through probably like 50 to 100 surgeries throughout the beginning of his life. So very inspiring. But for myself, I actually come from a very poor upbringing. I had a single mother who basically worked in a bar, made a minimum wage. My father wasn't well off when I was around. He was very well off before me with my other half generation, my half brother and 3 half sisters. Mm-hmm. So they had a really, really kind of, I would say, privileged upbringing in that way. But for myself, I didn't have access to those funds. They all got their school paid for. I had the opposite happen. When my father passed away when I was 16, my mother actually turned out he was sending money to her without telling me. And basically she was lying and saying that it was for me, but that money was actually being used for a drug addiction. So she ended up using that money, some of the money that I had saved for university for those debts. And then she actually just kind of took off, and I ended up going to live with my grandparents for the last year of high school. So coming from all that and learning to live with that was a huge struggle. I think that's part of where my passion, which was directed in the wrong way that I mentioned earlier, I think that's where it came from, because I felt the world owed me something. And I think a lot of people in our generation, especially in North America, have that thought process that, we are people that are more deserving than our counterparts. There's a great article out there if you search millennials and gypsies, and it's not actual gypsies, it's an acronym for these millennials.
Okay.
But it's all about how social media and the advent of social media, ironically enough, because we're going to be putting this on social media, has essentially forced everyone's brains to view all of these people around them on a higher plane of existence, because they see how well they're doing, when the reality is that they're all actually on the same plane.
That's true.
But because social media pumps everyone up, great example, we're doing this, there's going to be lighting tricks and things, we're appearing bigger than we are. Right. And so that's okay. But it does cause a psychological effect to the people that watch it, because then they think, oh, geez, how are these two guys doing so well when, my life feels like garbage? And it's like, no, our lives we're all dealing with the same struggles.
Yeah.
We all put our pants on one leg at a time, or our skirts on one leg at a time. And the fact that that exists causes a huge problem. So I think that when I come from that, and had that sort of passion, it was misdirected. But then when I realized the grit that came from that background, the amount of perseverance that came from that background, and then I was able to leverage it to become somebody who can actually help the community and help build people up and help them in those ways. Like you reached out to me out of nowhere, right? And we had that conversation, and there are a lot of people that would just shut that out and not even bother talking to people. So I think that is the perfect combination. So from a life story perspective, came from a lot of grits backgrounds where I had a lot of kind of hardships in that way. But make no mistake, there are billions of others that had it a lot harder than I did. And so I think if you're cognizant of those things, you'll always come out better on top.
Yeah. And I can't imagine how challenging kind of being brought up like that is. Every time, not every time, but a lot of times when I talk to successful people who are just like generous like yourself, they have had a challenging upbringing, and it was because of those challenges that they were able to become the person that they are today. Because like if we're given an easy upbringing, easy life, you don't have to work for anything, you don't really value things as much as for what they really are. And so it's sad that we have to go through these moments. Sometimes it's not like your entire life, but there are seasons of life that can be challenging. But if you persevere and you stay focused, and hopefully you have mentors or people, friends, family that can support you throughout that, it builds character. And then that character leads to so many things down the road.
It's funny you bring this up. I had a conversation with somebody recently about the idea of the adversity and the importance it plays in us as a species. Mm-hmm. All of our evolution is derived from experiencing problems or hardships and overcoming them, right?
Yeah.
And when we were talking about where the world's going, it's a really dark place right now. Like, where are we going to end up? And I was like, well, I think a CEO buddy of mine who runs Tahama, which is now which was before Pythian, Paul Valle, who lives here in Ottawa as well. He gave a great talk at one of our events about the future of AI and how he envisions, there's two possible outcomes. You've got on your one hand, your Star Wars outcome, which is this dystopian future with the evil empire, overlords, and all this crazy stuff. And then this, on the other hand, this Star Trek future where, the Enterprise and all of the people out there have all these great things happen and discover all these brave new worlds and all this sort of stuff. And so which one will it end up being, right?
Yeah.
So I was telling him, I believe it's the Star Trek, and, we'll have all this time to, explore the universe and focus on art and culture and learning, one of your passions that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, but if that happens, where's the adversity? Like, how do we grow and learn? If everything's perfect and everyone's happy, how do we grow as a society? And I think that's a really important question. If it becomes too good, like, where do we go from there? And I'm like, well, things are good. So what do we have to worry about? It's kind of a catch-22.
Yeah, we need those challenging experiences to even really enjoy life and keep growing.
Yeah, and I think that people would argue, well, the people that are well off, let's talk about The Hills, right? The TV show from back in the day, and all these like privileged people that have their reality TV shows and Instagram followings, stuff like that. And you think like, oh man, the problems these people are complaining about are ridiculous. And you're like, but if I grew up like them, that would probably be how I would think and feel.
That's your world.
So if we do get to that point, and that is our world, is that a bad thing that we don't have these things to make us better people anymore? I would argue, we earned it as a species. We got to a point where we earned that. And as a person, I think it's the same thing. If you overcome all the adversity and get to a point like that, you've earned the right to kind of, think in a different way.
Yeah.
In that way.
All right, Michael. So moving on to the next question, what would you say is one thing that people misunderstand about you?
Yeah. So thinking about that, I think that there's a lot of things that a lot of people misunderstand about a lot of people. I think one
Yeah.
of the biggest things, and I'm impacted by this as well, is that people have a tendency to think that everyone's so busy. And that's because a lot of people say they're so busy and they don't have any time and they're overwhelmed and things like that. And I think I do get overwhelmed sometimes by all the things that are going on. But I think back to, pre-COVID, when I'd be doing a lot of these events, going out and running them or managing them, or going out and attending these networking events or things like that, while also running my own business and a lot of other stuff. People would often say like, "Oh, like
Yeah.
you must never sleep, like you must not get any time for yourself," and things like that. And I think, part of it is I definitely have a privilege in terms of having that time and having the ability to do all these things. But I
Yeah.
think a lot of people don't use their time well enough. They don't or they proliferate the idea that they're so busy so that they don't get given more things to do, maybe, is the other part of it.
Yeah.
But for myself, I think people think that I work a lot harder than I do. Don't get me wrong, I do work hard, but I work smart as well. And I think that's something that a lot of people miss, is
Yeah.
that if you are really efficient with your time and how you run things, the life hacks, I'm sure you've heard life hacks, right? That is something that I live
Yep.
by. And doing things like that is something I live by. And so I think that's probably something that people misunderstand about me, is they think that I don't sleep and I'm working 24/7. But it's very easy to have that notion in your brain if you if
Yeah.
you if you are looking at me from the outside. But if you knew me from the inside, you'd be like, "Oh no, he's just a normal guy. He works a normal amount. He doesn't kill himself."
Yeah. And I
Don't
think
tell my
that's
boss that. No, just kidding.
I think that's a normal. I think most people would think like that when they see, let's say, they would go on your LinkedIn bio and see how you have different interviews and you're, connecting with so many people, and with anybody like on social media. Social media makes us out to seem like we are someone who we really aren't. And like you
Yes.
said, it's not about being busy. It's about, working smart and being productive. But there is a level of busyness that really takes away from life. I think it's easy, like an easy response is like, "Oh, how you doing?" "Oh, I'm busy. I'm doing things." But if you're to stop and focus on, what does that actually mean? Then the definition for busy would be different. And
Yeah.
I think a skill that should be taught in school or or by parents that everybody really needs to get on board is just being productive, but in a healthy way. Like not just being obsessed
Mhm.
with doing work, but scheduling in first time with like family, friends, things you're passionate about, and then building work around that. Um, and being focused. Like when you sit down to, like, for me, when I sit down and study, that's 100% what I do. For you, when you're dealing with clients or any other types of business, like that's what you do. And so everything that we do should be all in so that when we relax, we can relax 100% as well. And so then
Yes.
you're not just going to be constantly busy. You're going to have these short bursts of like productivity, but at the end you have time for enjoyment with the things that really give you life.
Yeah, and I think for me as well, a lot of the energy and recharging does come from people sometimes too.
Hmm.
That's a two thing, where you've got, people going to these events, meeting new people and stuff like that kind of fuels my fire
Yeah.
when I talk to people about that. I think the other part of it is surrounding yourself with, as you were mentioning earlier, those support systems, right? And the good people. You look at some of the best people in the world. Think people like Elon Musk, or trying to think of like really, I can even go to the opposite end of the hated spectrum and say like Donald Trump or something like that, right? I don't want to politicize here, but any of these people, it's not that they are these mad geniuses that have everything figured out and can just do all these crazy things without any care in the world.
Yeah.
It's they surround themselves with really good people. They surround themselves with people that support them. They surround themselves with smarter people than themselves. That's a famous Steve Jobs mantra, right? Where he would only hire people that he felt had equal level or higher level intelligence of him. He was never threatened. He said, no, I'm going to have these people in my corner. I'm going to get them to buy in to the ideas that I have, but I'm going to have them support it and go above and beyond with it. And I think that's a really important lesson for people to learn. A lot of people, I have clients now that they started their business with, a couple of people maybe, or just themselves in one case that I'm thinking of specifically. And now they have a business of like 30 or 35 people, and they still can't get away from that idea of delegating. They want to do everything themselves. They think if it's not done by them, it's not going to be done properly. And at some point you got to trust people. You got to put that trust in your support group and your people. And if you don't do that, you will fail. It's you are only one person, you're only one candle, and you can only burn so brightly,
Yeah. So you mentioned, let's circle back when we talked about like the rapid fire questions. You brought up TEDx and TED Talks.
Yeah. Good time.
How did you initially get involved with it? Because not only did you audition to speak, but you also if I'm correct, you're an organizer. Like you're involved in organizing the event. Okay,
so it's called cheating.
Could you tell us just about kind of like how you got involved with TEDx, and maybe give us a little summary of your talk, just so we get an idea of what you're passionate about?
Absolutely. And I gave a little summary earlier, so I won't harp on it too much with the idea of the passion and the curiosity. But where it comes from, and I'll give a special shout out to somebody who was instrumental, I think, for when we started our business here in Canada, Deborah Lovegrove, who was one of the main people that runs pretty much all of Tedx Canada. Wow. And she ran the Canada North Business Association along with Jenna Suds, who is now a city councillor for Canada. And it's now neither one of them are still there, but when they were a part of that organization, they were really helpful to me, and I gave back to the community to them. So I would volunteer. I helped out with the first test track launch for the autonomous vehicle program. I've got my Canada North t-shirt that I wear to do, it's helping move people around and make sure they weren't jumping in front of the autonomous vehicle to see if it would stop and stuff like that. So little things that, a lot of people I feel get to a point in life and they're like, oh, that's below me. I'm not going to do those things.
Right.
But I didn't have any way to give back. I didn't have a way to reciprocate the things that they were doing for the community and helping me as a business. So I offered that up, and just through developing a relationship with Deborah, I told her, one of these things I'm doing really well now, and I don't know how I got into it. You couldn't ask me, and I couldn't give you a solid answer on it, but I started doing all those videos, those interviews and stuff, and did really well. And through those, I suggested, hey, I could do these with TEDx, and I could introduce some of the speakers and do stuff like that. Right. Because I'm really good. I've found I'm really good with LinkedIn, and that could be like my channel. And she was like all over it. She loves the stuff that I did on LinkedIn. So she gave me the keys to the LinkedIn profile for that and said, like, I want you to manage it and I want you to do these videos because I think that's a great way to promote. And we had a lot of success with it. So the first year I did that. And then throughout that year following, we had a lot of conversations, a lot of deep conversations. And one of the things that came out is like, yeah, I have a lot of passion around things, and I'd love to do a talk like that one day. I just never thought, would I be able to do one? Am I known enough? Do people care enough about what I have to say? Probably thinking the same thing about this podcast, right? Yeah. So you're always questioning yourself in that way, but ideas are valuable. They do inspire. So and that's the sorry, go ahead.
Let's pause right there, and we can continue that thought where ideas are valuable. You mentioned that you started to question yourself and kind of doubt your ability or even significance. Like, who am I to even go on stage and share an idea? Impostor syndrome. And, the title of this podcast is Being Unstoppable. And doubt and fear, impostor syndrome, these are things that really creep in to to the backs of our minds, and they try to stop us.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like self-sabotaging. Instead of taking that step into fear and taking that step into the unknown in hopes of, discovering, forming relationships. Like, you would have never known that working with Deborah would lead to like TEDx possible
Never.
speech. But
Yeah.
if you let fear hold you back, if you had let it do that, then you would never got that opportunity. So could you just share some light in terms of, how do you deal with these negative thoughts, these self-doubts that try to hold you back?
I think the best way to deal with them, and the way that I deal with them, but everyone's going to have their own way. And I think this is something you learn in talking to a counselor, or getting self-help, or reading self-help books, or listening to self-help podcasts, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
They always tell you, don't, and it's actually a quote from a song as well. Love quotes. It's by Baz Luhrmann, and it says, it's talking about always wear sunscreen. That's, I think, the name of the song.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the points he says is, don't congratulate yourself too much, but don't berate yourself too much either.
Mm.
And it's about finding that delicate balance of knowing, am I doing fantastic? Maybe not, but am I doing terribly? Probably not either. Most people's choices are half chance, right? You will either pick the right door or the wrong door. Nobody has any knowledge of the future. We're not time travelers, right? We can't figure that stuff out. So I think that's one part of it, is knowing how to have enough self-love to not berate yourself, but not be such a narcissist to think that everything you do is perfect and you are the end all be all. And then the other part of that, I think, would be, having an ability to understand that everybody in the world is a person of the same birth. They are the same species, right? You may have better opportunities, or you may have more disadvantages in life, but you're still a human being. You can process thoughts. You can, speak. Obviously people with disabilities have different challenges and things like that. But at the end of the day, if you're alive and you have a soul and you're a person, you can do things. Your brain is operating, right?
Yeah.
So if you think of it that way, and you think of, like I said before, where people put their pants on one leg at a time, just like everyone else, whenever you think of that way, in terms of thinking about other people, I find that doubt disappears.
Right.
I find it really kind of just evaporates, and you think, well, this guy, I remember one of my very first ones was with Ellie Fathy of Mindbridge here in Ottawa. And I remember him saying, like, I was like, oh, I'm a little nervous about this. I haven't really done a lot of this before. And he's like, don't worry about it. There were lots of things in my life that I never knew I was doing either. And if you hear his story of coming from an apartment with 9 other people, like a single bedroom apartment where he lived with like 9 other people in India, or I can't remember if it's from India or where he's from exactly. Now it's not resonating with me, but he came from that sort of upbringing, and to then come to where he is today sounds unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And it's really just because he thought of the world that way. He thought everybody's on an equal level. Yeah. And that was really a bit of a game changer for me. So I hope people can take that in and think about that.
Yeah, it kind of comes back down to this heightened view that we have of other people, where we raise them up and say, oh, they're capable, but I'm not. But when you equalize and say, listen, like, everybody has an equal chance here. Will I mess up? Maybe. But that's, again, how you learn through these obstacles and challenges. So I wouldn't, in order to be unstoppable, you have to question your doubts, question your fears, and then push on through, because that's the only way that you're going to really discover what's on the other side of that door, of that fear.
Absolutely. And if you think of it like a scale, right? Mm-hmm. If you're questioning your achievements, right? If you're having that imposter syndrome, wouldn't it only be fair to, on the other side, question your doubts?
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's something that people forget. It's like, if you're doing that to yourself on your triumphs, why aren't you doing it on your defeats?
Yeah.
Because really, like I said, your choices are half chance, just like anyone else.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go back to your story about TEDx.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember where you left off?
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened was through through talking to her and developing that relationship, she said, "Oh, those are really interesting ideas. I really resonate with that. Like, could you turn that into some sort of a talk? I think you should audition." And I guarantee you, if I came out of left field and submitted my video and they didn't know me at all, I never would have gotten on the stage. But right. Because Deborah and Jenna and all the people that were parts of the Canada Business Association were knowing of me and knowing what I was about and knowing that I cared about people, I got that opportunity, which I believe I never would have had if I didn't have those relationships.
So network.
Yes, it's the network. It's the people you know. It's not what you do, it's who you know. In a lot of times, and people forget that too. You know, here's a really good story that I think will keep people jazzed. But sure. I had a boss that was the boss that actually kind of ridiculed me a little bit about knowing everybody that I was talking about earlier.
Okay.
And she was great, but she was very much like, you know, looking for a scapegoat. And I actually got laid off along with some other people. It was a high turnover job. And so I got laid off by her, and I was scapegoated for what I would call very arbitrary reasons. And I still hold steadfast to that. What happened not more than 6 months later was she was then laid off as well. I'm not going to out her because that's her prerogative to do. But when she was laid off, she got a lot of humility out of that. And then she was actually hired by a company that required us, as my new company, as my data center, to support and generate leads for her. So she needed my help. So she needed a good relationship with me. So she had to come back to the well and say, "Hey, you know, I'm really sorry. What I did was I scapegoated you, and I know that was wrong, and I didn't feel I had any options at the time, but I'm really sorry about that. And, you know, I'm hoping we can get past that and have a good relationship." And we did. And I gave her the benefit of the doubt, and I'm great friends with her now. I know her personally. Like, I know her daughter. I've hung out with her. We've went out for drinks with a group of friends. Like, you know, and we have conversations that I would argue are, I wouldn't like, there's no sort of relationship or anything, but we have conversations about her life or my life that I would argue probably wouldn't be shared on a podcast, right, and things of that nature. And to have a real relationship with somebody like that, out of that, like a phoenix from the ashes, if you will, it's pretty cool. And if you can develop those kinds of relationships with people, that's really going to drive you home. If there's ever a situation where she were selecting between me and somebody else for something in the far distant future, which, you know, not the near future, I can't think of any situations where that would happen, but we would now instantly choose each other because of that bond or that in the trenches sort of feel, right?
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
Yeah, and the word that comes to mind is just forgiveness. You didn't hold any grudges against her. Like you said, you gave her the benefit of the doubt. And I find people who are giving, who are successful, they don't hold anything against people. Like, sure, you can get hurt and it's not easy, but then you give people second chances. And, you know, from you, it turned out to be a great experience.
Well, and I always had that mentality, like business is business. I was taught that fairly early on. You know, don't hold grudges in business because it'll only bite you in the butt later on, unless those people are truly not deserving of your time and efforts, which there are some people out there. They're the as many leaders will talk about, Jordan Peterson's one of the guys who talks about this, but these time vampires or energy vampires that take your positive energy and sap it and don't give you anything in return. And you've got to be very cautious of those types.
Yeah.
But even outside of business, you know, I told you that story about my mother who stole my money from my savings for university and then took off to BC. You know, I talk to her now. I forgive her for it, because where does the grudge get you? What positive benefit comes out of that?
Yeah.
The only thing that you get out of that is the other person feels shitty. Yep. They feel terrible about what they're doing, right? And I don't think that's a world that I want to live in. So I take that philosophy to heart, and I hope lots of people listening do as well.
Michael, you're a giver. I think we've established that here so far. People can tell that you like giving giving of your time, giving, just reciprocating, even for lack of better words, just love. Like you forgive people and you like giving, I'm sure financially as well. Mm-hmm. And you love helping people. Tell me, why do you do it? And why do you think, maybe, and clarify why most people or everybody should be doing it as well?
Well, it's an age-old question, right? Is man good or is man bad? Or, people, are people good or are people bad, right?
Yeah.
Because the ultimate thing is that you think about it and you're like, well, oh yeah, I ran into that burning building to save the baby or something, that classic scenario. But did I do it because I would be a hero, or did I do it because I genuinely cared about the baby? Right? There's all these hidden minutiae in our subconscious that we don't really understand what's driving us sometimes. And I would say I couldn't tell you the true answer. I like to think I'm a good person. I like to think I want to help the world and that I'm this benevolent guy, right? But the reality is maybe it's self-motivation, maybe through nurture logic versus nature logic. I was raised in a certain way to think that that's the only way that I'll receive love or something like that. Who knows? I couldn't give you an answer, and I don't think anyone really can, because we don't know enough about our brains to really give truth to those types of things. I think Kant and many other philosophers out there, they've proposed these questions millennia ago, and yet we still don't have the answers because we still don't understand most of our brain. It's something like 5 to 10% we really get, and the rest of it we're still like trying to figure out. As a medical person, I would be curious as to your thoughts, because let's be honest, you have a lot more knowledge around neuroscience than probably I do.
Well,
as a hobby neuroscience person.
To be honest, I probably don't, because I'm only a first year and we get into neuroscience in second year.
So it's the next year then.
Yeah,
okay,
next year. That's a topic for next year. But I do think that, it's not as straightforward, because there is a selfless part where you want to give back to the community, you want to help. But there is a selfish part, because you know that, you could get something in return. And even if you don't get a physical item, you get this amazing feeling of giving. And that's kind of like, if people haven't given before, that's what's kind of like addictive. It's like, oh, I just helped this person, I feel amazing. So even just that feeling alone pushes people. When I think of philosophers, I often default to Jesus, because in my faith as a Christian, Jesus is my Lord. And what we read in scripture is he says that, he has given us life, he's given us forgiveness, and so many things, and grace, like even the ability to breathe right now is a gift. We're not entitled to another breath, but because we have been given all these things, go on and just give to other people, right? So you give because you were first given. And if we take it from, let's say, a more not a spiritual level, it's like our parents gave us an upbringing, they gave us food, they gave us, we didn't earn anything growing up. And I think if we focus from a place of gratitude, then you appreciate what you have in life. And so I've been thinking a lot about just gratitude. I journal every morning, and I'm always listing at least 3 things that I'm grateful for. And it allows me to really reflect, wow, my life is good. I had a tough day, but I am surrounded by people that love me. I am studying medicine. I have food. I can take a shower. And I think when we bring that perspective into our hearts, not just think about it, but into our hearts, then we feel a lot more willing to give back. If somebody wants some money, $5, $10 or whatever, if you're capable, it's here you go, I have some money because people gave a lot to me. Or, hey, do you have some time to do this? I'm like, sure. A lot of people. Here's an example. In undergrad, when I didn't have a car to drive to school, my pastor would give me rides. He'd offer me rides, and or we'd go grocery shopping, and he'd give me rides to go. And I was super thankful for that. Now that I have a car, if I have a friend that asks me, "Hey, Thiago, could you give me a ride to the grocery store?" I'm like, "Yeah, like 100%." I think back to this mentor who gave me so much of his time and money, I guess, and fuel, that now I feel compelled to give back to those who maybe don't have a car yet. So giving is like a gift that keeps on giving.
Absolutely. Great guy that I met just over a year ago now. It's probably close to a year and a half. Sandy Penhalder, who came here from India. He came up to me basically kind of not hat in hand, but he wanted like some advice and some help, like how to be a good business development salesperson or whatever you want to say. And I said, like, well, that's, you coming over and asking me that is pretty much 95% of what salespeople do, because you weren't afraid, right? You didn't, you were unstoppable. If I'm going to do a bit of a name drop for you. But that was his mentality. And then he pushed back. He said, well, yeah, but I want to know the other 5 to 10%. And I was like, well, that's all of it. You solved the equation, because now you've got it all, right? Yeah. You handled my objection. You went over and above. Couldn't respect that guy more for it. And we had a really good relationship develop, and he's absolutely flourished in this region now. He's killing it. He's hoping to bring his family here from India to, especially with COVID and the numbers that they're experiencing in India right now. He really wants to have them come here and have them be safe and have a good place to stay and things like that. And so you see how that helping kind of just proliferates more help and more help. Yeah. Because if I think back to like Ellie and him giving me that opportunity to interview him and give me that confidence to say, like, well, I didn't know a lot of things when I was doing this. You're doing it right now, so you're good.
Yeah. When
you pass that on to somebody, they inherently pass it on to somebody else. It's just like you said. It's such a good mantra to have, because it does always come back to you. It's very karmic. I wouldn't say I'm like, the Judeo-Christian mentality that maybe you have in that way, where your spirituality is very important in that sense. Mm-hmm. But I do believe in, karmic principles. And I do believe that, there are sciences in the world. I'm a very logical guy. So mm-hmm. I'm very much a man of science, if you will. But I do believe that if you go back 200 years and you look at what we do now, it would all be sorcery, right? People are like, what are you talking about? You can talk to somebody on the other side of the planet. What's the other side of the planet? I don't even know what that is. So if you think about that and the fact that it was like a sorcery of sorts, yeah. I think there's many, many things that we don't understand that are scientific in the future that we just don't get. We have not the capacity to understand these things yet. There could be a spiritual thing that we just don't get because, like in holistics, for instance, holistic medicine and things like that, there could be things here that are real, that do things, and people dismiss it because there's no scientific backing, but the science just hasn't come yet. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And science won't have the answer for everything as much as it tries.
No, never. Yeah. Never. It's always evolving. That's the whole purpose of science. Mm-hmm. Question, and question again. Yeah. And if you don't do that, you're not a scientist. You're a follower. Right. At the end of the day, in my opinion, you got to always be asking questions. Actually, there's another way to be unstoppable. Always ask questions.
Always.
Were you that kid growing up where you always put your hand up and asked?
In school, I wasn't. I would ask my dad a lot, like growing up, like, hey dad, like how does this work? Why does this happen? Like I would ask my dad. My dad was my Google back in the day.
I think he was everyone's Google back in the day.
Yeah. Moving on.
I guess you would have. You're a bit younger than me, so you probably would have had access to it, but we didn't have it, so that was our Google. Yeah. And I actually heard a really funny comedian tell a joke of how he was like, his dad told him a fact or something that the dad believed it to be a fact, and that guy would go around. He went around for 15 years saying like, "This is a fact. This is a fact. This is a fact." somebody finally was like, no, it isn't. And they looked it up and it wasn't the truth. And he called his dad and his dad was like, huh, well, oh, well.
Yeah.
But the kid's like, damn, 15 years of my life and I was saying these things. What the hell, man?
Yeah.
Come on. So I think that's very much, you got to ask those questions. And if you just take it at face value and never Google it, you just got egg on your face.
Yeah. You have over 5,000 connections on LinkedIn. So you're heavily connected. You have
more now.
Yeah. You what?
I have a little bit more than that now. I think I'm closer to 6 or 7 now.
Yeah. So you have over 5,000 and you have good networking skills. So let's take a minute and if you're willing, give us a quick crash course on networking. If a person listening wants to connect with a mentor or a business owner, maybe even to do deals in the future, what would you say, or how would you recommend they go about it?
There's some very simple things to do. Always be genuine. Mm-hmm. If you're reaching out to somebody, don't just spam them like a bot, like a chat bot or something, right? Have a real thing that you want to achieve. And it can be business related, but I would argue it's always better to start with a real conversation that you want to have with somebody. Try and find some common ground outside of, I want to benefit from you. A lot of people will try to benefit off somebody right out of the gate to start the conversation, and that never works. I think it's better to actually offer and try and give out of the gate, and you will always, if somebody reaches out to you and says, hey, I want to give you this, like I had a guy that, initially reached out to me and I was like, oh, here's another self-help guru trying to sell me something, like, great. And he's like, I rebutted him a bit and he said, I actually, I'm not even going to sell you anything. Sounds like you know your stuff, but I want to send you my book. If you want to just, you can read it, you can not read it. I just want to send it to you. Would you be open to that? I said, okay, sure. And I've started reading it a little bit and I'm like, okay, there's some solid points in here. And I appreciate that this guy sent that to me without any strings attached. He's got, he's got all the skin in the game with everything to lose. And I'm not losing anything.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of respect for people like that take that approach.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many hundreds of people I've had inbox me with the exact opposite. We are a SOE firm that does blah, 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 blah. And you're like, okay, bye.
Yeah.
See you later. So I think that's number one. You always have to reach out to give and be genuine in why you're reaching out.
Start with value.
Start with value, yes, and be genuine in that as well. And then the other part of it is, there's like mnemonic devices or whatever things you have to do to remember people and remember, what they're about, or associate positive things with them. Because another kind of like superpower that I would argue that I have is I have like this Rolodex in my brain that kind of just logs, important things about people and what's really important to them. And then when things come up that are in that wheelhouse, I'm like, oh, I've got to send this to so-and-so. Like an example would be just the other day, I sent this article about universal basic income, UBI, and how Kingston has recently adopted it. Like as a council, they've pushed forward to say this motion should be passed on a national level and we should have UBI. And they're the first council ever to do that, which I think is fantastic. And Floyd Merskew and Paul Valle that I was talking about earlier are big champions of that. They run the CEOs for UBI endeavor. You can Google that. There's a petition you can sign to get it addressed by Parliament, things like that. But I remember reading that article and I thought, man, Paul and Floyd would love this article. I don't know if they've seen it. They love this stuff, but in case this flew under their radar, I'm going to send it to them. Sure enough, Paul emailed me back like 2 days later, like, yeah, that's fantastic. Like this is a great article. Thanks for sharing that with me. And stuff like that, I think really solidifies the connection, really makes you tight with that person, and you can't buy that. You just can't.
Yeah, because you're thinking about that person without even talking with them, and then that's like means the world if somebody would reach out to me and say, hey, thought about you, here's something that I think you'd be interested in. Yeah, it definitely solidifies that connection, like you said.
Yeah.
If you could have dinner with any three people, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Stephen Hawking.
Okay.
I think he's got just so many great ideas that he's a man. I think he's a man ahead of his time. And if you were to like freeze his brain, which he donated to science, so if you were to freeze him in time and then bring him forward 300 years, I think he'd still find ways to be relevant and help society, which like from a scientific perspective, which I think is really cool. I would argue Einstein would be in that realm. So I'll put those two together as the same type of person. I think Gandhi would be really interesting to me because there's somebody who really sees it from a spiritual level, a spiritual perspective. Because I think, like I said, in the future, I bet we will find tangible links between the sciences that we know now and the spiritual things that we think we know, but we're not sure about. Right. I think there will be that link. So I would have that as be my second. And then, just more of a fun one. I think, and I've mentioned him a couple times, like Elon Musk, I think is really cool. Just to kind of pick his brain a little bit in terms of today's world, because all those other people are more figures from the past. I'd like to know his thoughts on the world now and where he sees it going from his perspective, because I think he sees the world in a very different lens than most people do. Yeah. And his thoughts and goals around Mars and space exploration are really quite monumental to me and my visions and thoughts, because I think there's just so much out there.
Yeah, he's just definitely a man of vision.
Yeah. If you could, what about you? Give me at least one. Give me at least one of yours.
Jesus, 100%.
I knew it. I knew you were going to say that. I knew it. I love it. That's great.
No one else except for Jesus. Should be pretty predictable.
No, man. And here's the thing. Like, if all of that is real, I don't say if it is or isn't, because I don't know. I wasn't there, right? But if it was, that would be absolutely on my bucket list, right? I would absolutely be with you on that one, because what an interesting guy. And I wonder too, we have the stories of that and stuff passed down through all these generations, through the Bible and everything. You wonder how much of that was his real self, was his real teachings, and how much of it was like, oh, well, we changed this word and then we changed that word, and thousands of years later, oh, that wasn't nearly what I was expecting to have come from that, right?
Right.
Very much in the U.S. with the founding fathers, and this is only a short, few hundred years have passed, whereby they say things in the Constitution that are completely, I argue, mistaken from what their initial intention was. Mm-hmm. Right? If you were, a gun-toting citizen, it was because you had legitimate reasons and fears in the world at that time to worry about. You had to protect yourself from bears and like wildlife. You had to protect yourself from evil people that were going around like pillaging houses and things. We live in a society where that's not necessarily like something that has to exist anymore. Right. Yet the belief is still there that's a thing that we need. Mm-hmm. So I think I would be interested as well. I would agree with you on that, guy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's definitely a conversation we can have after the podcast and continue.
Yeah, exactly.
Continue on in our friendship.
Yeah. Yes.
Michael, if you could go back to 20-year-old Michael and give him some advice, what would you tell him?
I would say, exactly some of the things I've been saying already, but it is be more cognizant of giving than taking for yourself. I think it's the biggest takeaway. Yeah. I think it's a simple answer, simple and succinct, but that's absolutely.
Michael, it was a pleasure talking with you and getting to know your story. If people wanted to learn more about you and connect with you, how could they do that?
Reach me on LinkedIn. If you send me a message and you don't try and sell me your SEO platform, I will absolutely message you back and we can hang out. And you know that better than anyone. So definitely do it. I highly enable that.
Yeah, there you have it, guys. Like, make sure to send him a thank you message. Give value. If you have something to give, lead with value, and then you can build more of your network, more friendships that who knows where it could lead you. As you guys have listened to Michael's story, the opportunities are endless.
As well for doing this. I think it's a great initiative, and I loved it. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. All right, guys, if you gained any value from this episode, I ask that you would take a screenshot and tag me at Thiago Luzvargi and share it on your Instagram stories so that more people can have a chance to listen and have their life impacted. And I'll share these stories with Michael because he doesn't have Instagram. Isn't that right?
I'm not a big Instagram guy. No, I do have one. I think I have a couple photos on it when it first came out. You got to try out the tech, but I don't really use it too often. Probably should use it more. It's just I've always been really into the LinkedIn. And again, I'm not busy, but the more of these things I include in my life, the less time I feel I have for the other things. So
yeah, your focus is on LinkedIn, and that is good. I will share any stories that I receive with you. Well, until the next episode, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.
Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, it would mean the world to me if you left a 5-star review on whatever platform you're using. Maybe that's Apple or Castbox. It would mean a lot. Also, if you know anyone who has an unstoppable story, is inspirational, and is having success in their area of expertise, then please send them my way so that I can share their story with others and encourage more people to live the life that they are designed to live. And I'll see you on the next episode.